All right, we are now recording. Welcome, everyone. Today is the September 5th, 2024, and I am so excited to be here. This is our initial podcast for achieving unity through the power of helping others by caring, helping, and including others in what we do on a day-to-day basis, which definitely shows the ways that we can build on promoting understanding, encouraging collaboration, inspiring positive change, and building a sense of community. It's an exciting process as this is a weekly podcast, and we hope you can come back each week. But then, as I say weekly, I do want to say that on September 19th, 2 weeks from now, we will be having a webinar on my course at the same time. So we will not have the podcast, but we will have the course webinar, which we hope you'll join. And if I don't have your email address, please send it to me. Always get in contact with me at mark@markentrican.com. Let me know because we'd love to have you. They'll be part of the webinar. So a little bit about me. Let's talk about Dr. Mort. Dr. Mort, welcome to the show. I am so impressed by what you do. I think I've told you this several times about being the master on ending anger. Tell us a
Yes.
bit more about yourself and your book.
Well, first, thanks for having me here, Mark. It's an honor to be here as your first guest on your new podcast. I wish you lot well. Hope it does well over time.
Thank you.
Um, and so, what would you like to know about me?
Well, first off, you've got how many books on anger? You talk to us and you share with us
Yeah.
so many ideas and concepts of how to eliminate anger in what we do. And please forgive me if I'm wrong, but I believe you have over 20 books
Yeah, I've
that
got
you've written.
I've got 23 books that I've written over the last 40 years on various topics related to like anger and stress mostly. So this is my most recent one, Dr. Orman's Life-Changing Anger Cure, which came out in April of 24. And this is the one that where I really talk about how I work with people, how I've helped people to go from being angry folks to not getting angry, not reacting with anger, which is what happened for me back in my 20s and 30s, where I had a lot of anger in my life as a young man and a young doctor, and then couldn't do anything about it for years and years and years. Finally, after doing several years of personal development work, I figured out how I was generating the anger inside of me, which nobody had ever taught me to understand. And once I had those missing puzzle pieces, then I could step in and take control of my anger in a way that I didn't even think was possible. But actually, it was very easy once I knew what was really going on.
That's a good point. That's one of the things that I work with that I enjoy. We've been on one podcast before. We've shared one together. Of
Hmm.
course, we want to say thank you to Dr. L for introducing us and through the JV directory. But one of the things that I've seen about what you do with talking about anger and what I just heard was that it's a learning process. How many times, as I speak of a lot, is our culture brings anger, we allow culture to bring anger into our lives, maybe from childhood, maybe from school, possibly the secondary schools, possibly work. But we don't, a lot of times, know what anger is. But I think I heard you say that you learn about anger and how it may originate.
Yeah, well,
Is that
we know what it is. We feel it most of the time. Although some people, if you grow up in a family or an environment where you weren't allowed to feel anger, then you can suppress it. But most people, when they get angry, they kind of know they're angry. What they don't really know though is why they're angry. What is how is their brain? It's really our brain that causes us to get angry, and they don't understand what the process is internally. They see something outside of them that they don't like, and that triggers them to get angry. So somebody does something or doesn't do something, or criticizes them in public, or lies to them, or steals from them. They see the behavior outside of themselves of other people, And sometimes, same thing, if you get angry at yourself, you see your own behavior, you mess something up, you forgot to do something that was important. You see the behavior, and then you feel the anger. And mostly that's where our education has stopped. It's just left the puzzle with those two pieces, and it hasn't gone further to say, well, what about the other steps that are involved that we don't see?
Mhm.
And that's my mission, is to fill in those gaps, to have people see the invisible causes of their anger, which go on inside of us and in our brains. And they're not, it's a shame they're not being taught in, you could teach it as early as middle school, high school, certainly by college. Um, People shouldn't graduate college without understanding where their emotions come from, and a whole bunch of other things, but
Mhm.
particularly emotions, relationships, stress. Those are three big things that you should learn about in your education that aren't really being taught.
Well, let me touch on an idea that, again, I love talking to you and listening to you because there's so much that what you share about anger is and emotions is so interesting to me because I deal with the psychology of it and
Mhm.
coaching with others. One of the questions I have is you talk about not knowing anger. How many of us know love? Even some of the emotions that we talk about every day, and how many times we hear the words, well, I love you and I love you forever. And how is that? You talk coming from the mind. How about love
Well, it's
compared to
funny.
hate? Do we know?
Yeah, yeah, many years ago, one of the most popular books ever written was The Road Less Traveled by a psychiatrist named M. Scott Peck. And it's a whole book about how we have these crazy ideas about love and these screwed up ideas about love, and how in his patients that he saw in his psychiatry practice, they would always come in with these love issues and relationship issues, and he traced it to a number of things that our culture teaches us about love. And you can actually, if you really want to get the worst education possible about love, just watch The Bachelor or The Bachelorette.
I know.
And you'll see the
Excuse me.
messages that are being transmitted, and the assumptions that are being conveyed. So a lot of times without really speaking to them, but they're just inherent in what's being advised, or what's being highlighted. And we get all the wrong messages for what love is, and that's consequently we have a lot of problems in that area because we don't understand the basic dynamics correctly. Same thing
Mhm.
with emotions. Yeah, and love is an emotion. It's a sort of well, it's actually not an emotion, but it it's partly an emotion. A lot of people don't realize love is more action, your actions, than it is your feelings. You know, it's
I
it's
like
it's
what you're saying there. Go
it's
ahead.
it's giving to other people. It's accepting other people. It's giving grace to other people, forgiving other people, appreciating other people for who they are, and communicating that to them, that you enjoy them for their qualities. Those are all aspects of when someone feels love. That's what the other person or people are doing, is they're giving them acceptance, they're giving them acknowledgement, they're giving them respect, they're giving them all those kinds of things. And then the feelings follow from the benefits of that, creating that kind of a relationship. But
And
well,
that
unfortunately, we tend to put the emphasis on the feelings and forget to do the actions, or we do other actions that are not very loving. And like anger, for example, is not a loving emotion, and we end up wondering why our relationships fall apart.
that's true. And I like what you're saying about your feelings because those feelings build into what we know about love, hate, anger, and we have expectations. And I like that you use that word assumptions.
Hmm.
If we're growing up in a family that we haven't felt that love, we haven't learned what love is for one reason or another, how are we going to be able to grow it within ourselves and
Well,
then
it's
be able to?
never too late, because we all grow up in families where we that don't understand anger, and don't convey to us, the truth about anger. You basically have to decide to go search it out on your own, because you're not going to get most of it in education, in standard education, even private education. You're not going to get some of the training for living life well that you need. So you, at some point, you decide, yeah. my family really wasn't well equipped to provide me with this education or this knowledge or this wisdom. I got to go out and find it myself. And so you go out and you figure out, you get some help understanding what love is, how relationships work, how to not screw them up,
Yeah,
which most of us are very good at. Left to our own devices, we can screw up any relationship
I'm good at
without
that.
help.
Yeah.
Without help, okay, it's just built in. It's just built in. But to understand how they work and what are the behaviors and what are the moves in a relationship that are healthy, and then which ones are, you have to decide to take that on as a challenge, and figure it out, and get some help from people who have learned the lessons the hard way. And there are plenty of people teaching about relationships. There's plenty of people teaching about love, and there's very few people teaching anger elimination,
Right.
like I teach, but there's a lot teaching anger management, which I'm not that crazy about. But to really understand the causes of your anger within yourself, so you can turn the anger off whenever you want to. That's, to me, that's like the pinnacle of anger mastery, and being able to deal with anger and other emotions. Uh,
I,
you could do other things for fear and guilt and worry and other kinds of emotions. If you know the internal causes of them, you can reach in and turn those causes off and turn the emotion off in the process.
Oh, that's so true. And just quickly for everyone that's listening, the endangerbook.com, right there at the header above Dr. Mort's slide, that's where you can go to find out more about his book, Life Changing Anger Cure. So,
Yep.
as he's mentioning, we may not know a lot about anger. I know I didn't years ago. I'm not angry. Sure, I'm mad, but that's different. Anger is rage. Anger is something else, but
Yes.
it's not,
No,
right?
it could be, it's a whole spectrum. I mean, at one end is rage and hostility and hatred and all the stuff we're seeing, in the news, and you see on social media a lot now, people punching each other on the street and ganging up on other people and stuff like that. That's one extreme. But the other side of anger are the little day-to-day annoyances and irritations, and things like that can also be very damaging. I mean, that can kill a marriage, over time. Little things you're annoyed about that just build up over time, and then people don't want to stay together, or at least one of the people don't want to stay together anymore because they've just had enough. So it's not the big blow up anger all the time that's the most dangerous, although that is dangerous and bad for you. But the little kinds of anger that build up can be just as bad. And everybody gets irritated, everybody gets annoyed, everybody gets frustrated from time to time. And a lot of times we don't use the word anger to associate those feelings with, but they are part of the anger spectrum. And the importance of knowing that is that they have the same identical causes. It's just, whether you end up with little anger or huge anger, it's all coming from the same anger producing mechanism inside the brain. It's a
Well, let's
formula
touch on,
formula
go
that the
ahead.
brain uses to create anger. Yeah,
Well, let's touch on that a second. And I'll make sure to tell the audience if there's some questions after this, after Dr. Mort responds to this, I'd like to go to the audience and ask if there's any questions.
sure.
But like you talk about little bits of anger. Now, one thing my son told me back when he was probably just 6 or 7 years old, he mentioned to me, he says, you have like 10 seconds of anger. He says, I can see you get mad, but that's all. And I took that as a compliment. Of course, it startled me at first,
Uh-huh.
but you mentioned those little bits of anger, and we do all have them at times, but you also mentioned they build up.
And
So
they
what?
can linger. I mean, you can get irritated with somebody, and yeah, you're maybe irritated for a couple minutes, but then you may keep thinking about it. May keep replaying that situation, remembering the situation. That little bit of anger can stretch out over days and weeks and sometimes months, where you're still kind of not, you're still kind of harboring some negative feelings about that particular person that you had that incident with. So, and then sometimes it goes away. Sometimes you can make it go away quickly. Like I remember Tiger Woods. I remember him being interviewed years ago, and people were the interviewer was asking him, how did he get so good at controlling his emotions on the golf course, which he's excellent at on the golf course. Okay. And he said his father taught him how to do it when he was very young. And he said his father told him, said, Tiger, you can have any emotion you want on the golf course. Any emotion that comes up, you can have it as long as you don't let it last more than 8 seconds. If you let it last more than 8 seconds, You're doing it wrong. You got to move on to the next shot and just forget about it. And so he learned how to discipline himself to do that. And you can literally let go of something in a couple seconds. Whether you know the causes or not, you can just stop paying attention to it or stop making a big deal about it and move on. But a lot of times we have anger that lingers and can cause all kinds of health problems, relationship problems, problems on the job, problems with our kids and our marriages. Not to mention, getting addicted to drugs because we don't know how to deal with our emotions well, getting into legal problems, even getting. I mean, you can even get yourself killed if you
Right.
get angry at the wrong time, in the wrong place, at the wrong person. So it's not a innocuous thing. I remember I was in a workshop a couple years ago, a very small workshop with maybe 10 people. And there was a woman in the workshop who was a mother of 4 kids. And years ago, her oldest son was in high school. He's having all kinds of problems, psychological problems, social problems. So the kid was having difficulties, but they were home one afternoon in their house and they got into a fight in the living room. And at the end of the fight, the son turns to the mother and says, "I hate you." And then he turns his back and walks away. And the mother just in reaction says, "I hate you too." And so the kid walks upstairs and she thinks he's going to his bedroom. Well, he goes to his father's room, gets his father's gun and kills himself. So that's not to say that her anger caused that, because the kid
Right.
wouldn't do that if the kid wasn't having tremendous problems otherwise. But that's something she felt responsible for years. And it really, not only did she lose her son, but it put a tremendous strain on her relationship, and it just, feeling guilty and all the stuff that uh, happened as a consequence of that. So anger is not a thing to be, tinkered with. I mean, it can be very dangerous. Yeah.
It's very true. So, isn't it, as I mentioned, if anyone in the audience would like to ask a question, please feel free to go to your react button at the bottom, raise your hand, or if it's at a pause, please go ahead and speak up. So we have Jamie and Jordan, Ravi, others. If you have a question, please let us know. One of the things that you just mentioned, though, Dr. Mort, I don't want to speak on the very negative side too long, but as you mentioned, there's a situation where what she said may not have caused the situation, but could there have been something said that may have been able to help prevent that situation with her son going upstairs? And then we'll
Yeah.
talk to Jordan right after that.
Yeah, yeah, I'm sure there were a lot of better things she could have done in that situation, but it was she just reacted automatically, like most of us do. Anger is mostly a knee-jerk, automatic kind of thing. We don't think, see something and say, "Oh, I think I'm going to get angry." It just happens. It's just automatic. Our body and our brains are programmed in certain situations to just automatically respond with anger. It's what you do after you get triggered that makes all the difference. And in this case, there may be, in retrospect, there were obviously better things she could have done, and and not that that caused her son to do that, but
Right.
it tipped him over possibly a little bit. He probably was going to do it anyway at some point if he felt that badly. So it's not necessarily true that she should bear the main responsibility, but she
Oh
did
no,
react
that's
automatically in anger, and it had a negative, impact on her son. So,
mhm.
Jordan, you have a question?
Question. Hey, Jordan, thank you for coming. You're off mute, but I can't hear you.
Yeah, is your microphone engaged with Zoom?
I'm showing your microphone working, but you're off mute anyway.
Can't can't hear you. Yeah, but you can put it. You can put your question in the chat.
He's gonna cut. He may be gonna come back. Okay,
He's going
come
to go out,
back.
go out,
Go
and
back
come
and come
back.
back in.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Okay. All right. Good.
Hurry back. Good to have you. Good to have
Yeah.
Jamie, Ravi, all of you. Good to be here.
Yeah, we learned sign language today.
Jordan's great. I should tell a quote he gave me one time. He's a good. Uh, but back to that, I think you mentioned a good point. And I guess that's why just my situation, and I'd like to hear more about yours too, Dr. Mort. But my situation there's no doubt I get angry. I mean, there's times, as you say, it's a flash moment. It's something quick, but to control that anger in that process so it doesn't carry on. When you do the 8 seconds, you know, if you can do the 10 seconds and then control it so it doesn't grow, because sometimes does it also feel like a seed? That little bit of anger is a seed that is fed, maybe the
Well,
good
we
wolf, bad wolf.
definitely, well, there's two. So the way the process goes, something happens that triggers us. We automatically react with anger. Our brain automatically clicks in and does what it does to make us angry. Okay. And then at that point, we have to make some choices. What are we going to do now with this anger that's already been created? Another thing our brain tends to do is it can prolong or accentuate the anger. It can make us think in ways that makes us even more angry and then more angry, and that prolongs the anger. And again, we all along, once the anger's been created, all along the way, we have some choices now as to what are we going to do in response to it? How are we going to think about it? How are we going to interpret it? I know you talk a lot about helping people realize how little value there is in getting angry. And once you learn that as a lesson and you see that it's true, that's something that you can work on reminding yourself whenever you get angry. Now, wait a second, this is not going to give me any positive benefits. Why am I even going to worry about continuing to be angry or stoking up my anger or expressing my anger, whatever, or punishing somebody out of anger? Because it's just not going to pay off for me or for them. And that's a useful insight because it's true most of the time that now there are a few occasions where anger may have some positive value, but most of the time, like you say, there's no value to be found. So why, so that's again, once we get triggered and that can click in and you can bring that wisdom to bear, if you've learned it and
Mhm.
if you've embraced it, and you can say to yourself, wait a second, I'm not going to go down this path that the anger wants to take me, okay, or my brain wants to
Right.
take me. I'm going to go on a different path, and I have the choice to do that.
Mhm.
So that's
That's
something that I
exactly right.
think
Your
as
choice.
human
Go ahead.
beings, human beings, our brains make us angry kind of automatically, where we don't have a lot of choice in getting angry. But once we get angry, we got a lot of choices to click in at that point. How are we going to express it? How are we going to express it? Do we even need to express it or continue to, amplify it? And all those are decision points that we can, intervene once we realize that we're angry.
And
Including what I teach people how to do is to use each example of getting angry to remind yourself how your brain is tricking you when you get angry. And that's really where the thing that I didn't understand about anger when I was in my 20s and 30s, even though I was educated as a doctor and I also did some psychology, experimenting on my own. The thing I didn't realize is every time I got angry, my brain was playing a trick on me. It was distorting my perception and making me think things were true when they weren't really true, or they were maybe partially true, but in some ways it was my brain was leaving out stuff. It was not seeing the whole picture. It was making me believe that it was the whole picture when it wasn't. So there are lots of tricks that our brains play on us, and nobody's telling us that that's where our anger comes from. It actually looks like we're perceiving things truthfully when we get angry, but
and
our brain is making us think that. At the same time, it's causing us to perceive things untruthfully. So it's the brain is really tricky in the way it does it. It hides from us the fact that it's tricking us, which is another one of its tricks. So
well, I like to hear what you're saying because that's very interesting. And I've got your book. I did buy your book. Haven't
mhm,
had the chance to read it all the way through,
mhm,
but I like what you're saying about how that brain operates, our brain,
yes.
how it operates and tricking us to the point of we have, it seems like, perceptions instead of reality
Well,
in our own
we have
mind.
partial perceptions. We only see certain things. We don't see other things. And so there are lots of holes in our perceptions, and the brain covers those holes up. We have a hole each of us has a hole in the back of each of our eyes where the optic nerve comes into the retina. There's no,
Okay.
there are no retinal cells in that territory in the brain. So theoretically, you shouldn't be able to see in that. There should be a hole in our field of vision, a small one. There should be a little hole in our field of vision because there's no retinal cells in when the light hits that part of the retina. Okay, but the brain just fills it in. It actually gives you a full, complete field of vision, even though you're not actually seeing everything that's there. So it's manufacturing, it fills the hole in, so you have a continuous visual field. But it's a trick. It's like an optical illusion. Okay.
Mm.
But the brain has lots of tricks like that. It can add things to our perception. It can delete things from our perception, or just remember the gorilla. You remember the gorilla, a visible gorilla experiment, where some psychologists set up this. I think it was Harvard. They set up this experiment where they have a bunch of people, some wearing white t-shirts and some wearing black t-shirts, and there's about 10 of them in a group, and they're passing a basketball around, and the people, the test subjects, are told to focus on the basketball and count the number of times the white players touch the white clothed players and the black clothed players touch the ball. So they're intently focusing on the basketball. And in the middle of this exercise, a guy in a full gorilla suit comes through a door and walks right into the middle of the group and walks right through and out the other side. And then at the end, they asked the people who were observing the event how many saw the gorilla. And more than half of them never saw the gorilla. It walked right
That,
through the middle of the room. And when they play the video back again, they see that it was right there in the room. They just were focused on one thing, and by focusing on one thing, their brain deleted everything else, which was parts of reality that were just sitting right there in the middle of the room. The brain said, "Nope, there's nothing there."
that's
So,
very interesting. Yes.
but our brains do that all the time. So when we get angry, we have these filters. Yeah, it may have been a female gorilla. I don't know. It was in a gorilla suit, so I couldn't really tell.
Not gonna go there.
I don't remember the exact
But,
details of the study, but it
but,
definitely could have been a female. But our brains are always filtering things. So they're always, and part of the reason is there's so much data out in the world. We can't attend
exactly.
to everything that's out there, and our brain knows that. So our brain has evolved over millions of years to simplify things so that we can move around and make decisions and do what we need to do to live and get along and survive. So it condenses things, it simplifies things, it dumbs them down, and it leaves a lot of stuff out. So, and it decides what's important and what's not important. And your field of vision may be motivated differently than mine based on your history. So certain things may be more important to you, and you'll see them, and I might attend to other things. Okay, so we'll be looking at the same thing, but our filters are going to be a little bit different, perhaps.
Mhm.
So the brain has these filters, is my point. And anger is caused by three specific filters. And most people haven't been taught that. So the
I
filter,
didn't know
the,
that.
the filters are very simple. The first filter is when you're looking at things, you see somebody doing something or something doing something bad and wrong that it shouldn't be doing. That's the first filter, bad and wrong. You have a bad and wrong judgment about whatever's happening. The second filter is that there was hurt or harm or some negative impact being a result of that bad behavior. Okay. And then the third filter is that whoever did the bad behavior, you kind of focus in on them. Like in the gorilla example, you're just looking at the basketball and you're just focusing on that person's behavior. And that's what you see as the cause. It's like unilateral cause, I say, because you only see that. And there may have been other causes involved, but you don't see them because you're focused on that one person. So, for example, if you're working at your computer one day and you've just spent several hours doing some very important work, and your computer screen goes on the fritz, and it's just snow or something or a blue screen or whatever, and you start to get angry at your computer. Why did you get angry? Well, three filters kicked in. Okay, the computer shouldn't be doing this. It's bad and wrong that the computer is doing this. It shouldn't be happening. It should work perfectly. The second filter, I'm now negatively impacted. I can't continue to work, and I may have lost the work that I just spent hours doing. And who's to blame? It's the damn computer's to blame. You know. So those are the three filters that cause anger. And whether you're in rage or whether you're just a little irritated, it's all the same thing. If you're standing in the line and the line's not moving fast enough and you're getting irritated, well, the line's not moving fast enough. That's something that shouldn't be happening. It's wrong. I'm being negatively impacted. I'm in a hurry. I want to get somewhere. I can't, I want to get through this faster. And who's to blame? Well, whoever's holding up the line is the cashier or the stupid people ahead of me who can't find their change or can't find their wallet or who knows what is going
Writing
through
a check.
our head. Yeah, or asking some question that not having a consideration for the rest of the people in line. But there are all these filters that we have, these negative views, the three of them in a row, that our brain just automatically activates and makes us see the world through those filters. It doesn't mean that that's actually the truth about the situation. You know. In fact, a lot of times it's not the truth about the situation, but the brain's telling us that's what's true. And so it's lying to
Mhm,
us, it's tricking us.
mhm. I like what you're saying. I want to touch more about that, but let's see if Jordy can get this. Is your sound working now?
No,
No, still can't hear you. I wonder if it's on my end with the
no,
permissions. Did you get a permission
no, no, no,
question at the
no,
beginning?
no. I think it's his microphone has to be synced with Zoom.
I just wonder if it asked something in the beginning.
If you
Do
go to the
that,
mute,
but
if you go to the microphone button and see if the microphone is selected.
hmm. I'll have to check that on my end before we start again next week. But let's touch back on that while he's looking at that, Dr. Mort, because what I'm hearing is, and I think I wrote that book on that first example that you gave, which is the computer not working, because I have a theoretical close relationship with Microsoft. I pay them a bundle of money every month. Excuse me. So I think they work for me.
Yeah,
But
but that's
it
another thing. So if you're in that situation, you're paying somebody money and they're not delivering the way you expect they should, then that's going to show up as something bad and wrong. You're now negatively impacted because you paid the money, you didn't get the benefit that you expected. That was the deal. That was the deal that was broken. And who's to blame? Microsoft.
of course, it's their
That's right.
operating system.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know
Now,
this.
a lot of times when we're working on our computer and something doesn't work, uh, it could have been that we didn't bother reading the manual or the program that we're using. We didn't bother learning how to use it properly, and so we made some mistake or something, and now we're blaming the computer because that's what our brain will have us do, and it leaves out the part. Well, what was our role in the matter? And sometimes with the computer, we didn't do anything. The computer or the electricity or who knows or the internet, who knows what went out. But even then, did we have backups? There are a lot of ways in which we could have helped avoid the situation that we didn't. So all those things, all the roles that we played, direct and indirect, get deleted from the scene, and all we see is the damn computer's not working.
Right, and you bring up some good points there too, because it goes into something that I work with, and on the fun side of the domains I have, but I've got one that's it's called "What the Frustration,"
Yeah,
and I hear a lot of what you're talking about kind of goes with that. That
yeah.
is anger based on our frustrations, because we
Well,
just want to say "What the," and it's the
anger
frustration inside us, is
for
it?
me, anger and frustration are two different emotions with two different sets of filters that cause them, but they're closely related. And a lot of times when we're frustrated with ourselves or a situation, we're angry at ourselves because we're expecting to be able to do something
Expectations.
and we're expecting to be able to do it easily. And when we try and try and try and it doesn't happen, then we deem it that we're doing something wrong or something wrong is happening. It shouldn't be going this way. It should be working out. And I keep trying harder and harder and I'm not getting any closer. And then we get angry with ourselves. So they kind of share some similar internal causes, but they're actually slightly different. Almost frustration is like a neighboring emotion. It's like right on the edge of anger. It shares some elements of it, but it's actually its own emotion. But it feels like anger at ourselves sometimes.
Well,
Um,
I'm hearing some things that you're saying on that, and we talk about getting angry with ourselves. And I know it's one thing that I do because I always want to look at myself first because I know I make mistakes.
Mhm.
But there are there, I don't know, maybe change it into a question. Aren't there a lot of people out there that don't think the anger is any fault of their own? It's not their fault. They're
Well,
angry,
mostly,
but it
remember, that's the third filter. The third filter is it's not my fault, it's your fault. Whoever I'm angry at, it's their fault. I didn't have anything to do with it. That's the filter. That's what the brain automatically tells us, whether it's true or not. And in a lot of cases, anything, if you're in a relationship with somebody and you get angry at that person, all right, one of your filters is that they're 100% responsible to blame for whatever they're doing. Okay. Never true in a relationship. It's never 100% zero in a relationship. If you're in a relationship with somebody and they're doing something bad and wrong, you're playing a role one way or the whether you know it or not. You're either contributing to them doing that, they're either doing it in response to something you're doing, or you may have seen it enough times and you didn't do anything about it. You didn't stop it, or
mm,
you couldn't figure out how to stop it. So whatever it is, it's never 100% they're
okay.
responsible and 0% you. So
Well, let's touch on that. I think Jordy just brought up a good point.
yeah,
He put a comment out there. I
thank
believe
you.
I have seen people who are naturally prone to anger. What are your thoughts?
I have seen
Just
lots of
that,
people. No, I've seen people. It's funny when I've done a lot of workshops over the last 40 years, and a lot of them are on stress, and I include the anger piece when I do that. So I may have like 40 people. Anytime I do a workshop, I have like 40 people or more in a room. When I start talking about anger like this, and I start showing people how they can get control of their anger, invariably a couple people will raise their hands and they'll be angry with me for doing that. Their filters will be that I'm doing something bad and wrong by teaching this material, by showing people how to let go of their anger or stop being angry, because they are very attached to their anger. They think anger is a badge of something, a value, or part of. People have actually told me that it's part of what makes us human. If we don't have anger, then we're not human. You're taking their humanity away from them, which of course I'm not doing. But they have a value system where they value anger and they cherish their anger and they believe it's part of who they are. They have an identity around their anger, and of course, they're going to have more of it than most people, but they're not going to see that they're creating all of that. And that anger doesn't really have to be there most of the time in their life, but they've made it into a virtue. And then they're now advocating, for anger and against anyone who would be preaching, you don't have to be angry.
well, that's a good point too, because I like what Jordy put in there also, that to many people, it seems that they feel that through that anger, they have some kind of power. Maybe it's their loud voice or their
Well,
action.
anger does have some uh, power to it. It sets boundaries. It intimidates other people. You can sometimes get people to do what you want by getting angry at them. So anger has effects on people, and people use it to dominate and control sometimes, or to make themselves feel more important or more powerful or more of a leader. Ordering people around. They're usually not the most effective leadership styles, but there's some people that's what they have perfected and that's what they use. Um, so yeah, there's the anger. If you're raising a young child and they start to run in the street, into traffic and they're not looking, you may want to use anger to impress upon them the importance of the transgression they just created,
Oh,
and
well, let
and the
me
danger.
touch on that a second because that's one that I'm working with. That when have any of us ever seen someone that is angry, and even back to Jordy's comments of that power that they think they have, whatever it may be, that they're angry, that we would want to emulate or tell the story about and feel excited or proud of their lack of control, and we're angry. I mean, how many
Well,
people said, "Well, he was angry the other day, she was angry the other day, I'm going to be like them."
Well, the problem is if you have a group of 100 onlookers, there's going to be one or two in that group that's going to think that's a great thing and you want to use it as a role model. You may have others on the other thing that think it's the worst thing that you could do. So there's just a whole range of way people interpret things will determine what they latch onto and pursue.
And I
But
like
Yeah, most of the time, I think most of the time, I'd say 95% of the time when we get angry, it's totally unnecessary. We don't
Mhm.
need to get angry. We're getting angry because we're seeing things incorrectly and we don't realize that that's what's going on. We don't realize our brain is tricking us or we're making mistakes in perception. So the
Or
whole
have we
thing
even
is,
learned that there's a better way
yeah,
to handle
yeah,
that
yeah,
than anger?
yeah. So
The
that's what,
person,
to me, those are the missing puzzle pieces in our education system in terms of empowering people to understand their emotions, is to realize a lot of times we, particularly a negative emotion, but even in a positive emotion, love, when you're in love, your brain is tricking you too.
uh-oh,
Sometimes,
I'm in
you know,
trouble.
sometimes, and we've all had this experience, you're infatuated, you fall in love, the person that you're having those feelings towards, you see them through rose colored glasses. They can do no wrong, they have no bad qualities, they're going to be loyal, they're going to be honest, they're have good character. That all Now, that's not to say that people don't ever have those qualities, but we can be seeing them when they're not really there, and we can have a distorted set of filters, and then later on you interact with this person over time and their true character comes out. You get to see how they behave in different situations, you get more experience, with what their strengths and weaknesses are, and you find out your filters were all wrong. Overall, you may have had, they still may be a positive individual and somebody you want to spend time with or even spend your life with, but the false, picture you had in the beginning when you were all hyped up with this infatuation, and these positive feelings, goes away, and then you're left with reality, and hopefully the reality is still going to be good, but in some cases it turns out to be not so good, and
It
then
does. And it seems to be a lot of times, as you're talking, I was portraying a little bit that anger is a lot like gambling because sometimes you win. Sometimes that anger provides
yes,
what you wanted, even though there may not be any value to it.
yes,
But
it's like,
you're ang
worry. When we worry, we're really doing a rain dance. Okay, we're getting ourselves all emotionally worked up about something in the hopes that it's going to protect a loved one or something bad's not going to happen. Okay, so suppose, you're a parent and your kid just got their driver's license and they're taking the car out for the first night, and you said be home by 10 o'clock. They said, oh, we'll be home. I'll be home. And it's 10 o'clock, they're not home, and 11, 12, they're not home, 1, they're not home. And now you've been worrying now. You're worrying, oh my God. And part of the worry, your brain tricks you into thinking if you just worry enough, you'll keep them out of an accident or you keep them from getting killed or something like that. And then they come home. And what does your brain do with that? It goes, you see, the worrying worked. It's proof that
Yeah, it's works.
worrying protects your loved ones. So what are you
We
gonna do next time?
think it's proof. Yeah.
What are you gonna do next time? You're gonna worry again next time because now you have this piece of evidence that you worried and they came home
Yeah.
safely. Okay,
Okay.
so it's
Just
like that.
quickly, Jordy, thank you for coming. I hope to see you also next week. I mean, stay as long as you can, but
Yep.
thank you so
Thank
much for
you.
being here. But
Thank
anyway,
you.
I'm sorry, Dr. Moore, go ahead.
Yeah. So, it's funny that one of the thing, our brain is doubly and triply tricking us, and when we get angry, because one of the things it does. So the first thing it does is it feeds us these three filters where there are usually flaws in the filters, but we don't notice it. And the brain is telling us there's no flaws. So it gives us three flawed filters. And then on top of it, it says, there's no flaws in these filters. Trust them. They're true. Okay. So when we do that, those two things, when we look through the three filters that our brain gave us, and when we buy into the truth of the narratives, okay, then we get the emotion of anger. And then what the brain does, it says, oh, you're angry. Therefore, and you have this intense feeling that makes you feel like you're right about what you're seeing and what your judgments about what you're seeing. So the anger doubles back and cements your filters in place, and keeps them from being questioned because your emotion of anger makes you feel right when it was all set up to begin with. Your brain tricked you into believing something that was false, and then convinced you in several different ways that it was true. And one of the ways it convinces you is makes you believe that the feeling of anger is proof that you're on the right track and that you're seeing things accurately, which is the exact opposite of what's really happening in
Mhm.
life and in between life and your brain. And
And
it's
that's
like
like in
it's the
gambling.
most insidious, it's the most insidious self-protected system.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it's
You win
amazing that people will break through that and go like, wait a second, what my brain is telling me isn't really true. I can see that. I can see now that that was a false, perception or a
perception.
false assumption or expectation, whatever my brain was selling me wasn't really true. It's amazing that you can do that because the forces are so strong in the opposite direction to make you believe it. Okay.
Mhm.
It's literally no different. It's no different than how the media makes us angry today. The media knows those three filters that I just told you.
Yes.
Their business model depends on being able to make large numbers of people angry whenever they need to. Okay.
Hmm.
And what they do is they feed us these three stories. They feed us the story that somebody did something bad, wrong they shouldn't have done. You know, Putin did this, or who knows what. Okay, somebody's going to be hurt and harmed, negatively impacted, and Putin or whoever he's associating with is to blame. Okay, they feed us the three stories. Tell us they're true. Okay, and then they say trust us, we're your trusted source of news, and don't bother questioning anything we say.
That's the
That's
scary
foolish.
part.
That's foolish. In fact, we're going to come after you if you question us.
That is
Even though we're lying to
like
you most of the time, if you point it out, we're going to come after you.
that is so true. And you
So our
mentioned,
brain is doing the exact same thing. If you watch the media, you'll know what your brain is doing. They're just mimicking what your brain does.
mhm, and
And
I
it
tell that
works. It
people,
works every
mhm.
time. It'll get you angry every time.
But Dr. Moore, isn't that the same thing to the quote that you are like your five, six, eight, 10 best friends? Maybe you only have three friends, but you're like the people that you hang around.
Yeah, well, you'll sort yourself out. In other words, if you're around people and you're sharing how you see things and they're disagreeing with you, then you're going to eventually part ways with them, and you're going to collect people in your orbit that are going to agree with you and are going to acknowledge you and are going to support you and cheer you on, and that's how you end up with a select. You've sifted through a whole bunch of people to get those five people,
Mhm.
and so they have a lot. Their perceptual systems and filters usually have a lot in common with yours, and they don't rattle your feathers or rattle your cage as much as other people who don't share those same filters probably. Well, that's how we get the bubbles. You associate with people that think and feel the way you do, interpret the
Mhm.
way you do. And so they're not going to, when you say something completely stupid and completely wrong, they're not going to call you on it. Okay. But if you're in another group of people who are just looking at what you said and objectively, judging it, they may tell you you're full of crap, and you may
Mhm.
be.
Yeah,
But
but you don't want to hear that.
the people around you aren't going to be telling you that.
That's right. Those people that you're five or six, ever you're the closest people,
Yeah,
whether family, friends, work associates,
yeah,
whoever those people may be, that
yeah,
is still going to plant, like I mentioned earlier, plant that seed, and then it's up to you if you allow it to grow or not,
yeah. And
or
that's
if
how our filters. That's how our filters get reinforced because they're constantly being tested and reinforced. And the other people around you are going to feed into your filters most of the time and give them more power and more strength. And then they just operate and do what they do again on an automatic sort of knee jerk basis.
okay. Well, let me change the subject here just a little bit because I like what you said earlier about, for me, I didn't know. When I got out of college, I knew everything. Nobody knew something that I didn't know. And I know that. Okay, I wish that was true, but how many of us go through that? When should we? And I don't like the word should. When must we? When must we start teaching the things that you're sharing in your book? Life-changing anger cure. When is there a good time to start doing that? You mentioned earlier you have to know it by college, but
I
what do
think
we
early.
do?
I think middle school is definitely appropriate. I know when my book came out, as an author on Amazon, you can order author copies at a discounted rate. So I got my first box of 15 books that I ordered, and what I did the very next morning, I go out for a walk every morning, short walk, but I go past a group of middle school students waiting for the bus, and I pass them going out, and I turn around, and a block or two later, I pass them coming back. And I had been
Okay.
passing them for over a year. We don't really talk that much. Maybe we acknowledge each other once in a while. But anyhow, I grabbed five or six copies of the book, and I went on my walk. And when I got up to the group of kids, I handed each of them a copy of the book, and I said, "Hey, I want to give you this gift. Take a look at it. When I come back around in 60 seconds or whatever it is, you can give it back to me or keep it, whatever you want to do. It's fine with me." Okay. So I did. I turned around and I came back, and all of them decided to keep it, which shocked the hell out of me. But anyhow, but that's what that was my first impulse, is I want to put this in the hands of these middle school students who I pass every day and don't have really much personal interaction with, but they're in my life, and I wanted to share this with them. I wanted to put this in their hands because I want to do it for more kids that age, and I wanted them to be the first group that I gave it to. So that was my initial impulse. Like, this is your first podcast. That was when the book came. That was the first
Bookcast.
thing. My first thought was to
Do a bookcast.
do a bookcast, give it to these kids, and yeah, but that's what I want to get it into schools. I want to get it into middle schools, high schools, colleges, and also the other great place for it. Anybody who's doing coaching, life coaching, health coaching, where they're working with people. It could be. I've worked with several divorce coaches because anger comes up a lot, you know,
Yes.
around divorces. So anybody that's working with people where anger is going to be a big issue for them, and the coach could help them. I and I've trained a number of coaches in this methodology so they can be better at helping their clients when they come to them with anger issues that they don't know how to deal with. And a coach can get this book and study it themselves, and then advise their clients to go get it. And then the coach can coach them through the procedures or the blueprint that I outline in the book, because it would be helpful to have somebody to work through some of those things with you.
I
Although you
think
can,
that's
yeah,
that middle school option that you're bringing up. I think that's almost like the perfect way to start us, because isn't middle school the time? And I'm very strong on being non-gender, but I do know that about that age, that seventh, eighth grade, we're also coming about ourselves as far as being stronger, more forceful, or not.
yeah,
That's the time
more
when
self-aware,
self-aware.
and also more aware of the world, of how the world works,
So if we can get that book, that teaching, and into their hands, like you're doing, give them that option,
Yeah,
but even maybe put it into a course somewhere in that, what do you say, seventh, eighth grade. Start
yeah,
looking at a book like yours and showing that this is a situation that we are all going to come across, whether we want to or not. And most of us by that time frame have come across it probably more times than we wanted to.
yeah.
But
I tell people this looks like it's a book just about anger, and it is. I only talk about anger in the book, but actually, it's a book about all emotions. If you understand how anger works and how our brain tricks us to cause us to get angry, then you can understand how your brain is tricking you whenever you have anxiety, much of the time, not always. Whenever you have guilt, whenever you have worry, as we talked about just for a minute ago, whenever you have sadness, your brain is playing tricks on you that either create or prolong those emotions.
right,
And if you understand, anger is like the lead in emotion. If you understand anger well, since almost everybody experiences it from time to time, if you understand that well, you'll realize your brain, anytime your brain's giving you a negative emotion, it's coming from the same general mechanism of several filters your brain's making you believe are true, may not be true. Your
maybe
job,
true.
it's like in the Mission Impossible thing, your mission, should you choose to accept
And
it,
accept it. There you go.
is to invest. Once you figure out the three main filters, and usually there's only three, the three main filters that are causing a particular emotion, like anger. Your job now is to figure out where the flaws are in those filters that your brain is hiding from you and telling you are not there, but they
And I
are.
think that's a very good point, because to understand which of those filters and what's true and not true, and what have we come to, as we mentioned earlier, as I focus on that culture, that
Uh-huh.
learning, what
Mhm.
have we learned in our perspective,
Yep.
our perceptions of what we're doing, what we're not doing, and how we can carry that forward in a positive manner.
Yeah. And if enough people understand their own anger and realize that their brain's tricking them when they're angry and they may have bought into some false, if you can imagine, millions of people being on that same page, everybody, we're all walking around triggering each other all day long. Okay. But if we understood what was getting triggered inside of us and realized a lot of it is caca, that we're buying into, then, that takes away a lot of the anger that people just get plugged into and just becomes runaway anger. And then they start doing all kinds of crazy things and striking out at other people. And then that gets retaliation and it creates the mess. And we see in the world today with all this hatred and hostility and disunity because everybody's in their own bubble of false filters that they
And some
don't realize are false.
and so much that we hear on simple things such as road rage. Just a
Yes.
simple thing, and somebody just pulling in front of you or me, and first we label them, what kind of person they are, go through your three filters, but we're angry, we're flipping them off, whatever it might be, yelling, choice words, and that ability to understand back to what you talked about earlier, and thank you for mentioning that, is where I come from, is where is the value
Mhm.
in that road rage?
Mhm.
Back
Well, the
to
only value, if there is value, there could be value in that road rage.
how is
And
that?
the value is if you use that road rage to remind yourself of how faulty your brain filters are each time it happens. And you actually dig in and you challenge it and you question it and you see through them and you realize, oh, wait a second, I got angry because I had a false idea. Maybe I judged the person in the car ahead of me to be a inconsiderate, stupid person, and maybe they're not. Okay, that was just my judgment. I projected onto them. Well, when
Okay.
you start to see that that's what your brain does, then and you do that 100 times, then the 101st time you're less likely to buy into that judgment. You're more forgiving, you're more compassionate, you're more understanding, you're more willing to give grace to that person who's screwing up in front of you or doing
Mm-hmm.
whatever they're doing, because you realize that your brain is a machine that constantly misinterprets reality and sends it to you as if it's true when it's not.
And that's a good point. And that's one of the things that I try to do. And sometimes the things I do are a little bit on the crazy side, but I can just say, sorry I was in your way. I hope you get home soon enough that you don't miss the start of whatever program that is that you're watching. And maybe it is that Bachelor or Bachelorette program you talked about earlier. I
But is
hope
that
you
so? Is
get
that
there in
is that
time.
sarcasm or honest compassion?
Sarcasm, but it's still, but it still helps me. I just,
Yes,
I hope you get
yes,
there in time. I hope it's a good show
yeah.
because
Well, you take the
there's
edge
no
off.
value.
You take the edge off of it. It
Mhm.
makes you're playing with it a little bit, which makes it less serious.
Uh-huh.
And you're less locked into the seriousness of it, which is
Well,
good.
that's where I found that value because as we talked about, where is the value
Yeah,
in that
and you're
anger?
right. There's usually no value in the anger because
Nobody's going to send you a check.
it's coming from a false place. But we think it's coming from a true place, which is our big error. We have it exactly backwards most of the time.
Mhm.
And
And
that's
I
the
talk
way
about,
our brain keeps us trapped in our anger because it doesn't encourage us to question the narratives it's sending us.
that's so true. Dr. Mort, I think we could talk to you for hours on end. You share so many insights that I wish I would have heard back in middle school. Why
Me
didn't you
too.
write
Me
that
too.
book just a couple of years ago when I was in middle school? Because it would have helped me so much.
Yep.
But I thank you so much for what you're doing, and thank you for being here. It's an honor always to talk with you. And again, your URL's at the top of your screen,
Yeah, I'll put it in the
and
chat. I'll put it in the
okay,
chat as well.
if you would please.
There we go.
Thank you. Put that in there because it's a good book. And again, I have it on my screen right now. I have it through the bring back up. It's called Kindle in Kindle
Yes.
that I
Yes.
use. I've got the
Kindle.
book there so I can read it whenever I want to.
Yes.
It's excellent. It's a good reference. We'll refer back to it. But again, thank you so much. I appreciate you being here.
And
Everyone else that's here, thank you for being here. I'm coming to see Dr. Mort is always. It's a joy for me. I hope it's a joy for you, Dr. Mort. I'm hoping I can have you back maybe a couple of months.
sure,
Let's
be
bring
happy
up
to.
some more.
Be
I'd
happy
love
to.
to have that.
And
And on that,
best wishes with the podcast. I wish you a lot of success with it. And
thank you.
I think you're doing good work in the world.
I
So
appreciate that, Dr.
keep it
Mort.
up.
That means
Keep it up.
means the world to me for that to come from you because of what you have done and what you accomplished. And that puts on the point that this podcast is weekly, except for September 19th, 2024. We're going to be having a webinar on that date, which I hope everyone will let me know their email address so I can send you that link, which I'll put it in the chat in just a second. And we won't be here on Thanksgiving Day. We're going to help everybody has a fun Thanksgiving with their family, with their friends, whoever they might be with. We will not be here on Thanksgiving Day. We'll be here on September 19th of this year. But this is a continual process of learning from people like Dr. Mort. And then on that same note, we're going to be back here for next week, and we're going to be talking to Dr. Janice Orman, who is a relationship coach. She's a relationship and communication coach who helps individuals improve their communication skills and relationships, both personally and professionally. So again, Dr. Mort, thank you so much. Thank you to all of our audience. Thank you for being here, Jamie, Robbie, all of you already here earlier, all the others. Thank you so much for being here. I hope to see you again next week. Dr. Mort, I'm looking forward to seeing you again soon, talking to you
All
as
right.
well.
Thank you.
Everyone, take a copy of the chat. Here's the next information. So we want to talk more. Thank you all. Enjoy your day. Bye now. Cheers.